Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our first live for our political chit-chat. So I know that we've got some of our audience out there. It's great to see you. We look forward to having a good conversation tonight about some things that might interest you, and you're very welcome to put some questions up and some comments, and we'll address those as we go, as well as towards the end. Though for those who may not know who I am and maybe only tuning in for the very first time, I'm Helen Houghton, one of the leaders of New Conservative. So welcome. Now we start our weekly panel off with what is our why? So why we are involved in politics. Some of you may ask why anyone would want to be politically active. Anyway, to discuss this, I have with me tonight some of our South Island candidates. We have Karl Thomas from Methven. We also have Paul Deacon from Queenstown and Chris O'Brien from Ilam, who's here in Christchurch with me. So welcome to each of you gentlemen. And I can say that it has been an absolute pleasure working alongside you this year. And I know that South Island is in good hands. And over the coming weeks, the North Island candidates will also join me on this live, so you'll be able to ask them some of the hard questions as well. Although next week, I actually have Dewa De Boer, who will be joining me, talking about his why and a few other things that have happened over the last few years with Dewa and his family. So I guess I should probably begin with my why and a brief bio for anyone who's viewing New Conservative for the first time. Up until probably about 4 years ago, I was still teaching part-time in Christchurch schools, while I also ran a charitable trust supporting women, because I stepped out of full-time teaching because I had a real passion to work more in the community and help in that way. Anyway, I petitioned government around 4 years ago to remove some of the content from our sexuality guidelines, and that is the harmful gender ideology from our schools. And now I have currently I have a citizens-initiated referendum trying to remove that, get it banned from schools. Previous to that, my political voting was somewhere along the lines of between New Zealand First and National, and many years before that, I actually voted for a very different looking Labour Party. Don't hold that against me. I knew absolutely nothing about New Conservative until after I attended a presentation from the National Party with Nikki Kay. She was the Education Minister at that time. And after that, I didn't actually have the confidence that National was going to be safeguarding children or protecting parents' rights. And so I started to look around. I had to find an MP in my local area who was going to accept the petition that I had planned. And fortunately, there was a really good National MP who, oh gosh, her name's slipped my mind, and it shouldn't really, but anyway, that'll come back to me. But she did take the petition for me. However, she's not actually MP in Parliament now, which is a shame. I was contacted by a young man who saw the petition, and he was part of New Conservative at that stage. And so he introduced me to the leader of New Conservative, who was Leighton Baker then. And from there, I ended up becoming the Christchurch East candidate and stood in the 2020 election. Over the last 3 years, I've become on the board of New Conservative and now co-leading the party. So that's a little bit of my bio. As I said, I run a charitable trust supporting women and family because obviously children are my passion and we need to be investing in family. And so that to me is one way for me to do some practical things to help. So we were running parenting courses. I was teaching them how to knit, how to sew, how to crochet, and I purposefully didn't plait my hair tonight. So just in case that we get some comments around that, I'm sure that some of you will have a bit of a giggle, but no, I didn't plait the ladies' hair. Although if you're following people like the Disinformation Project, they seem to think that people that plait have red hair and knit are some kind of terrorists. We'll move on from there. Now, as well as the, just as well as that, parenting that, though, I decided to take on some of these women in education as well, because a lot of them had left school at such a young age and started a family that they did miss out on education. So to me, it was like, well, already a teacher, so I started teaching some literacy skills to them. A few of them went off and started their own businesses and carried on to do further courses. So I do believe in grassroots organisations who are in our communities, and I just give so much kudos to people who are out there doing that. There's not enough support in so many areas around mental health. That's another passion of mine. And all of those things I see New Conservative have a lot of solutions for. New Conservative, when I first looked into them, they were family orientated. They were the only party standing up against the gender stuff in the schools, and they protect all life. And for me, it was like, that was just a perfect fit. So that's my why of why I'm involved with New Conservative. So I'm going to hand over now to one of our guests, and thank you all for being here tonight. So Chris O'Brien, would you like to start telling us what your why, a little bit about who you are and your why? You're on mute, Chris. Unmute. Don't worry, we all do that.
Let's try again, shall we? Okay, so yes, thank you for that introduction, Helen. I'm Chris O'Brien. I'm standing as the New Conservative candidate for Ilam. Just a little bit of background about me. I've been married to my wife, Janet, for 40 years now, and we've lived in Christchurch for the last 30. My background is I trained as a geologist and spent about 10 years working in groundwater water resources as a groundwater scientist. I've worked as a secondary school teacher, teaching maths and IT, and I've also had 10 years experience working in mental health. Currently, I'm back teaching at a Christchurch secondary school. My skill set involves environmental science teaching and IT. To give you, as well as standing as a candidate, I've also been on the board of New Conservative now for over a year, and I'm the party spokesperson for life issues. I've been involved with the pro-life organisation Right to Life New Zealand for the past 20 years, where I'm currently the Society's president, and I've been involved with a lot of the work that Right to Life has been doing to help preserve the life of unborn children and also the vulnerable. We were involved at the time of the referendum with a very large campaign to try to get a vote to stop euthanasia coming in, unfortunately unsuccessfully. But abortion and euthanasia are two passions where I think we have gone wrong as a country. My reason for wanting to get involved with New Conservative is, well, I believe firstly I have the skills and the passion needed to be involved in this area, and I'm very concerned about the direction that New Zealand has been heading in the last decades. I believe as a country we've completely lost our moral anchorage, and I'd like to put my hand up to work towards making a difference. And I believe that the best way to do that is through politics, and I'm passionate about seeing New Conservative get into Parliament. And I believe that unless a party with a set of traditional values which underpin our New Zealand Judeo-Christian heritage, as long as those aren't re-established, we'll continue to sink into the quagmire that we find ourselves in. So essentially, I'm particularly concerned at the moment about the attacks on the traditional family. I think that that and the issue of abortion and euthanasia are the real things that I'm passionate about. And I fully support wanting to support Helen as the co-leader for New Conservative, and yeah, I really just want to make a difference. I feel very passionate about that. So,
thank you, Chris. Thank you. That's fantastic. And I can see we've just got a couple of people who I'll just throw up these here in case anybody didn't see them. Nice to see you, Therese. Great to see that you're following. Thank you. We have Dominique. Hi there, Dominique, from all the way from Blenheim or Nelson. Thank you. We've got who else is there? Greg. Hi there. Good to see you all from Greg. Nice to see you, Greg. And Chris, apparently you need to smile. Maybe you know that. Maybe you know who Martin is. I think you might be having a go.
Yeah, cheeky blighter. I do.
And Margaret, good to see you as well, watching from Waimate, one of my favourite places. I've been down there a few times this year and hoping to get back down there soon. We've got a comment here from Charmaine. Charmaine's always online. It's always good to see you supporting. There's a fully fledged cultural assault by the left on traditional Christian values. Well, yes, there's certainly some issues there that we're going to be addressing. And we also have Darwin. Great stuff from Chris there. There you go. Chris, do you know Darwin?
I do now.
You do. You do. Thanks, Darwin. And it's really good to see we have a great audience there. As I said, you can throw up some comments or questions and we will endeavour to answer most of them. Now, who would like to go next? I think, how about Karl? I can see you there, Karl. Would you like to tell us what your why is, who you are and what your why is?
Yes, certainly. Thanks everyone for joining us, and thank you, Helen, for having me here tonight. Yeah, my name's Karl. I am the candidate for Rangitata. I reside in Methven with my wife and two of my three children. The eldest one is away living in Australia. Something you'll know about now, Helen. It's always difficult when your kids are living away. I was born and raised in Southland. Joined the army once I was finished with school. I was in the army for 7 years. 2007, I did my last tour of Afghanistan. Decided to leave the army to spend a bit more family time. Left there and moved to Australia. Trying to look for better financial opportunities, which a lot of people do. Lived in Australia and worked there for a long period of time. Me and my family moved back to New Zealand in 2019. Yep, 2019. Not long after I brought my family here for a holiday. My wife is Australian. She'd never seen New Zealand, and once she got here and had a good look around, there was pretty much no choice. I was told that this is where we're going to live, and I was glad she fell in love with the place, and it was a great opportunity and a great time to come back. So it's been really great. We moved to Methven, great little rural town, great view of Mount Hart. Real solid farming community, real sense of community. It's a great place to live and bring up children. And so, yeah, that's how I've got to where I am now. My why, very similar to Helen. I grew up in a family that was very much Labour-based, and it was probably a time when, you always voted the way your father did, and that's what I did, and that's what he did as well. But obviously, with age comes wisdom, and you start to look at things a bit differently. You start to question a bit more, and really start to wonder what is there a better way? And I found that with New Conservative, and it's been quite a progression for me to go from where I was to now. But I'm glad I've gone through that, and so my why is. I think it's about individual freedoms. I think, especially what's happened with New Zealand the last couple of years. My time in the army, I was in the army because I loved New Zealand. I wanted to defend New Zealand, and I think it's time for me to do it again, just in a different way. So I saw the rights being eroded from our fellow citizens, and it concerned me. And I do believe that we're pretty much the only party that's addressing that situation. So that one's a big one for me. We've got a lot of issues at the moment, and we've got a lot of solutions which the major parties at the moment don't seem to have. So yeah, that's I'll pass it back to you, Helen.
Karl, that's fantastic. And I know that we are extremely grateful that you are here and, getting your hand involved in politics to defend a lot of the issues that there are, as you said. Interesting. I'll just comment on a few of the things you said. Yeah, your child being over in Aussie. Yeah, my oldest moved over there about 2 months ago, and finding that a wee bit hard, but I can completely understand why he wanted to make that move. And if we don't actually do something about New Zealand, we're going to lose lots more of our young people. And I'm certainly hoping I don't lose my other son as well. So we really want to make New Zealand a great place for our young people to be, and for them to be able to earn a decent living, especially to be able to purchase their own home and enjoy a good quality of life. I mean, we have such a beautiful country, and yet the way we're living, thinking of the cost of living, and yet we produce enough food that can apparently feed 40 million. Did you know that? It's just crazy, and yet everything is so expensive for us. And the other thing I just wanted to make mention of, Karl, is when you're thinking, a lot of people talk about left and right, and what you said I agree with. It's the wisdom. So I said I voted Labour for many years. Now I'm more conservative, and I think it's hasn't got a lot to do with left and right. It's actually more around maturity and wisdom. When we're younger, maybe we're a bit more thinking progressive is the way to go. But then as we mature, we realise the consequences of moving away from more traditional, sensible, solid, common sense things. So yeah, I appreciate you saying that. So thank you very much, Karl. And what we'll do now is we'll bring in, I noticed that Chris and Paul swapped seats, because Paul, just to let the audience know, Paul is, I know that the name tag is still up there as Chris O'Brien. So just so you're aware, Paul is actually at Chris's home because of internet issues. And while I'm talking about internet issues, I know that Karl out in Methven has got some pretty horrific wind at the moment. So if he cuts in and out, it's the weather. So yeah, I'm sure the audience can appreciate that. Now, if you'd like to let us know what your why is, a little bit about yourself as well. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you very much. For everyone watching, I'm Paul Deacon, and in the New Conservative Party, I'm the COVID-19 response spokesman. I am the candidate for the Southland electorate, which is Queenstown and All Points South. And I'm also a policy advisor to the board. A little bit about me and my background. I'm originally a POM, as you might be able to tell from my accent. I had a career with HSBC, which is a large multinational bank. I worked in about 8 or 10 different countries, each time in a quite different role. Those countries were in the Far East, the Middle East, and Europe. Then I migrated with my family to New Zealand in 20 years ago. First came to New Zealand in 1992, though, so over 30 years ago. I split my time between Christchurch and Queenstown, and I know both well. I've got a wife, 4 grown-up children, and 3 grandchildren. Most of them are still in New Zealand. Along the way, I trained to be a professional opera singer, and I also worked for a number of years in the voluntary and charitable sectors in the field of disc golf, which some of you may not know, some of you may. It's very helpful activity for community health, both physical and mental. I'm a generalist by nature, and by life experience, I've worked in a wide variety of different roles. And I think that's quite useful in politics. There's few areas that I'm uncomfortable talking about or dealing with or investigating. I've long been interested in politics for some decades, but I've lived most of my adult life in countries where I've been disenfranchised. In other words, I haven't had the right even to vote. So I've just been an observer. And I joined New Conservative 18 months ago. It's the first time I've joined a political party in my life. Why New Conservative is a question you might all find interesting. During the COVID trademark, I was very frustrated with the political responses of every single party in Parliament. There's 5 parties in Parliament at the moment and 120 MPs. And to that, you can add a 6th party, which is New Zealand First, which so that's 6 parties, and they all had the same response, and none of them stood up to defend simple freedoms and civil liberties, some of them dating back many hundreds of years. And I was rather appalled by that uniformity of opinion. So I swore never to vote for any of those parties again. But then over the next 6 months, I thought, well, that's a bit negative. What am I actually going to do about it? So I cast around at the other parties, and I found, quite to my surprise, that New Conservative shared a lot of policies and values with me. And that's pretty unusual. So I would say easily a 90% or better fit. So at that point, I rolled up my sleeves and joined the party. There you go.
Just takes a minute to get that news off. Thank you, Paul. Just before we move on, Paul, I had a meeting with Paul in the early days. I think it was partway through last year, and found out that he was the chairman of the Disc Golf Corporation. At that time, I had a young autistic boy that I was fostering, and he had a support person who had just started taking my wee lad out to do disc golf. So as time went on, we realized that the support person that looked after my wee autistic foster child, he ended up becoming so good at disc golf, and I don't know if he'd be watching, but he was on the news recently as one of the New Zealand champions. So it's it's obviously becoming quite a popular sport, Paul. And I just had to have a wee giggle about your opera skills. I'd love to hear you sing. I know that you made a song, created a song during COVID, and maybe that's something we can share sometime. But that also reminds me that when I turned 50, I started to learn an instrument, and that is the violin. And actually, my violin tutor is online in the audience, and I really miss coming out to see you, Darwin. It was really special times coming out to learn how to play the violin. In fact, I haven't been able to pick up the violin since I've been politically active. So maybe after October, who knows? Thank you, gentlemen. So really great to have you here. We've got a few comments. Where are we? I've got just good comments, Karl. Strong voice there, down to earth and common sense. That's from Margaret down in Waimate. Thanks, Margaret. And Charmaine has said, thank you, Chris and Karl, for standing. We've got Dr. Foster here. All right. Oh, this is an interesting one. Hold on, I'll just put this up. We've got Dr. Foster, who said, Churchill said, if you don't vote left when you're young, you have no heart. And if you don't vote right when you're older, you have no brain. That's a brilliant. Oh, gosh. Yes, that's an interesting one. Darwin, slip of the tongue there, Paul. Not sure, I might have missed that one. Okay, where are we? Would New Conservatives support abolishment and criminalisation of abortion? Abortion is murder and going against God's command. Okay, so before we move on, let's have a little bit of a chat around our abortion policy. We are pro-life. We're a pro-life party. It's not only some of our candidates who are pro-life. The pro-life is actually the value and the principle of what New Conservative stands up for. It's one of our founding principles. So there's no mistake. There's no, you know, some of us are pro-life and others aren't. We are clear on that. What that looks like, however, is going to be we want to support women who find themselves in that position where they have unwanted pregnancies, and there's a lot of practical things that we can do around that, especially making sure that adoption is easier process to go through. Chris, is there anything you'd like to add around that with our abortion?
Yeah,
life
sure,
issue?
Helen. I think your comment about adoption is really pertinent because back in the late 60s, I think our adoption numbers were around about just a little shy of 3,000 to non-relatives. For the last decade, they've been below 100. And I think that's quite shocking in the environment where there are so many people who, wanting to have children, wanting to adopt children, but basically the government policy is not supportive of that. The other thing I would point out is that I think the key issue with abortion is that we focus on the personhood of the unborn child. Until we actually establish that the unborn child in law is a person, I think all other bets are off. So I think one of the ways in which New Conservative is going to address that is to be looking at the personhood of the unborn child. Because at the moment, as you're aware, most people watching will be aware that it is now legal under the Abortion Legislation Act 220 for a baby to be aborted right up to birth. And that's just not good enough. We know that most New Zealanders are completely opposed to such liberal laws. It's totally unacceptable, I think, for an unborn child to be considered a non-human, one side of the birth canal, and when it reaches the other side, it becomes a person, as if something magical has happened. So, as I say, one of the things we'll be looking at is definitely looking at the personhood of the unborn child and challenging the current legislation.
Yes, I can confirm that. That's exactly what we'll be doing as soon as we get to Parliament. We'll be talking about ensuring that there's legislation that gives the unborn the personhood status. Some of you will be aware that we actually have mountains in New Zealand that have got a personhood status, and yet here we have unborn living human children that do not have that legal protection. And yes, Charmaine, I see that you said the unborn is a person. You know it, I know it. Absolutely. We would not argue with that point. So we completely agree with you. Darwin, are you aware of, here we go. Hold on. Darwin, are you aware of any other parties as opposed to abortion as New Conservative? I'm aware that the one party, but look, no parties that are in Parliament, no parties in Parliament have are opposed to abortion. I can assure you of that. Where else are we? Oh, Dylan, you have other strings to your bow now. Thank you. It's a good one. Well done. And Dylan also said that it's great to have you and Karl on the team, Paul. Thank you. Yes. Margaret, where are we? Helen, you're going to be too busy after October being involved in Parliament. Yeah, okay. I get it. I know. I was trying to retire when I turned 50 so I could just sit back, drink tea, play my violin, hang out with some of the women that I like to support. Fortunately, those women haven't seen me for a few years, but even when we get to Parliament, Margaret, I'm sure I can make some time for a few other bits and pieces. Okay, thank you to the audience. We've got some great comments and questions here. Martin got a question. Right, where are we? I'll throw this up on the screen. What is the New Conservative response to the wasted vote argument? That's number one. Let's address that one first. Who would like to take that wasted vote? Well, I'll just start, and then one of the candidates might want to jump in. So to me, the only wasted vote is voting for somebody that does not have your principles or values. And if you're thinking of doing it just to be strategic, that is complete wasted vote. Anybody else like to jump in onto that one?
Yes, I'd like to say that we have at the moment, and we're not alone in the world in this, but New Zealand, on many of the key political issues of our day, we have something like a uniparty in Parliament. We have 5 or 6 parties who have a single voice, whether that's on COVID response, whether that's on climate madness and net zero, on a whole host of things. So, if you want to vote for that, more of that, go ahead. New Zealand is a bit shocking in that on all these issues, we don't have a single member of Parliament speaking out. So if anybody in any of the parties in Parliament speaks out against the narrative on global warming or transgender, or on COVID, they immediately get clubbed by their party leaders, as we've seen quite a lot in the National Party, for example, and they have to do Soviet-style confession. And it's important to have voices in Parliament that speak out. The countries that have, like the UK, for example, had a less bad COVID response as a result.
Yeah, that just brought to mind Maureen Pugh to go and do some more reading, or was that re-education? A lot of re-education happening out there. Right, number 2. Sorry, we won't move on from you yet, Martin. You've got number 2. New Conservative comment on the unification effort of the smaller parties, Conservative vote. Okay, that's an interesting one. I'll have a little bit to say, and then I'll pass it on to others in the on the panel who might like to comment on that. Comment on the unification effort of the smaller parties. Gosh, there's a lot that I could say on that. It's a challenge, and it's been challenging. I will say that New Conservative have spoken to pretty much every smaller party, and we've been in discussions over the last 12 months, maybe even longer. We have had many meetings with various party leaders and groups. As you can see, there is an umbrella out there. We're still talking to some parties. We have made our statement very clear that we are not going to be aligning with the umbrella, the Freedoms umbrella that's out there. There's obviously reasons why we have made that decision. There's very good reasons why we've made that decision. It's important, I note on the end of your comment or question, Martin, that you talked about the Conservative vote, and that's one of the reasons, because we are sticking with conservative values, and we do not believe, or I do not believe, that aligning with people who are not conservative is actually helping our cause, because all we're doing is bringing people into Parliament who are on the opposition, on the team of the opposition, people who would be voting with Labour and Greens. So that's just a little bit, just a wee bit of my opinion and statement around that. Is there anybody else on the panel who would like to talk about the smaller parties and that unification?
Yes, very quickly. I think...
No, what about if I add a comment or add a little bit of a supplement question to it? Maybe Paul, you might like to address this. If you were in a party, like you talked about, this is the first time you've actually been a member of a party, which is a pretty big deal, that you haven't been a member of a party previously. if you were with a party that you've chosen specifically because it was conservative, and then that party started to involve themselves with other people who didn't have the same values, actually had some completely opposite values, would you still want to support that party?
The simple answer is no, and I've made my views plain within the party. Some of the parties who it's talked about joining with, perhaps not seriously, I would actually resign my New Conservative Party membership if our party got into bed with them. I think many of these parties are simply not serious. One of them that's often talked about got 0.08% of the vote at the last election. I don't even know why they're worth expending breath on. Other parties are so wildly different in their policy platform. As you said, they're basically well on the progressive green side of politics that there's absolutely no reason how we could go into bed with them. So I think it's a bit of a non-issue. I think it's a lazy way of thinking to think that we're going to get into Parliament under an umbrella rather than under our own steam.
Thank you for adding your opinion there. And I didn't say anything about getting into bed with anyone, Paul, but hey,
Sorry,
it must be the POM way of addressing it. Yeah, no problem. It's all right to have a laugh occasionally. Another question from Arena. Sorry if I haven't pronounced that correctly. Arena. We have, will New Conservative consider leaving the UN? My opinion is the UN is not the UN that with the original mandate, and they have far too much control. I don't see why New Zealand would be taking any directives from any organisation that is not, I'm not for globalisation. I think we need to be looking after our country, doing what's best for our New Zealand people. So if that's my opinion, my choice, then I would say yes, and I'm fairly certain that most of New Conservative people feel the same about that. Any further comments on that, Karl? Or
well, like I said earlier, I'm ex-army, and one of the things I'd comment about that is you should never concede your country's sovereignty to another country or another foreign body. New Zealand should be able to freely set its own laws and values for itself without influence from the UN. I don't have any issue with being involved in an international group, for the betterment of the world, but I'm definitely not going to do it at the, on the back of the average New Zealander, I can tell you that.
Anyone else want to say anything, Chris or Paul?
Yeah, I think it's very important that we maintain our sovereignty and not under the control in any aspect with any directives coming down from the UN or the WHO for that matter. I'm quite sure that most of the board feel the same way about that issue as well.
I'd just add very quickly, it's slightly more nuanced than leaving the UN or staying in the UN. I think we could possibly stay in the UN but get out of a great many treaties.
Super. That's great. Thank you. And we've got Dominique. It is a fact New Zealanders do not raise their voices enough when forced with wrong policies from this government. Yeah, I agree with you. And Dominique, one thing I have enjoyed seeing over the last couple of years is people, I'm not a fan of protesting every week. However, I do think it's fantastic to see New Zealanders now actually raising their voices, standing up for themselves, standing up for our people. Protesting is important, as is petitioning the government. And yes, I think it is great that New Zealanders are doing that. But like you said, for a long time, they haven't stopped these things. When I put the first petition out of from education, there were many that had no idea of what was going on. Some people still didn't want to believe it. We have to actually have our eyes open, and sometimes we're so busy in life that we don't always see what's going on around us, but it really is important to not, to think about the next generation as well as ourselves and our own family. Thank you, Dominique. We have...
Can I make a comment on that, Helen?
Oh, yeah, yep, do that.
I think just generally the New Zealand population are actually really a trusting people. We have a lot of faith and historically in government institutions and things like that. And to a degree, I do believe our mainstream parties have really abused that trust. You don't have to travel far. Some of us have been to a few other countries. They're a lot more vocal, and it doesn't take much, before they start to speak up about things. And we're starting to see that in New Zealand. And I'm actually glad to see that we're starting to see that in New Zealand, because we need it.
Agree. And that's even in the small institutions, right? Like our education system. I mean, being in education for almost 20 years, I've often felt like some teachers have far too much control over children, and they're not their children. We've got parents out there, and it's time for the parents to actually realise and stand up for your own children. Don't think they're aware of what they're sending them into sometimes. But thank you, Karl. Now we've got, the questions are coming in really fast. Fantastic audience. Thank you for your participation. Where are we? Latest poll. So the latest one that I saw, Charmaine, is we were on 1.7. We've been at 1.7 early this year. We hit 2.7. We've had 2.5. A little bit of dropping, going up and down, which is pretty normal for the polls, but we have been consistent right through since the previous election. And the previous election, yes, we only got 1.5, but we've actually increased that. And that says a lot, even through the fact that we've had new leadership and different things happening. So Martin, where are we? Hold on, just before I go to Martin, yes, Melanie, I'll jump in there just because you have commented on the same question. I agree with you. I think they are unfit for purpose for many reasons. So back to Martin. What about the New Zealand position on WHO and proposed treaty? Oh gosh, look, I was just reading something about that last week, Martin. I was pretty shocked actually to see the different amendments there. I don't actually have them in front of me at the moment, but one of the articles was talking about, they actually had there about the dignity of human rights, etc., and they've completely taken it out. It's like, excuse me? So there's definitely some issues there, and it's no different than the UN. Those organisations we need to distance ourselves from. Margaret, what is New Conservatives' policy on co-governance? Okay, so do we have a policy on co-governance? Well, I can see a thumb going down. We oppose co-governance. That's a big conversation, but enough for you to know that we oppose it. Dominique's also talking about co-governance. What should be our response? We're opposing it, Dominique. Meaning that we don't think that you can have co-governance. For example, actually, no, I'm not. It's going to take far too long to actually even go into that. We might leave co-governance for a topic on its own, but enough to know that we do not support co-governance. Government has covertly snuck in bad policy. Oh, when was that, Charmaine? I thought that's all they ever do. Yeah. Okay.
Just on the co-governance issue, Helen, I think it would be safe to say that we in terms of, say, looking at three waters, we believe that the water of this country is not owned by any single ethnicity or any single people. It's a resource that's available and owned by everyone, and I think that's very clear from what I understand our policy is.
Yes, I wrote a press release a couple of weeks ago and I talked about that, saying that Labor, I think it was Labor who said the water belongs to everyone. And then National said the water belongs to no one. And I think I added the water belongs to no one, but we all have rights to the water. I completely agree. I mean, how on earth are we having a debate about water ownership? Is just mind-boggling. Dr. Foster. Love to know who Dr. Foster is. And to add to Martin's question, what about the UN Migration Pact, to which Jacinda signed us up without telling us she would do that when she was campaigning with no. I say no to all of those. No. Anybody would like to jump into the UN Migration Compact?
Well, I'd just like
look
to
after
point
New
out
Zealand as we can house our people, but go.
I don't think John Key also advised us that he was going to sign the UN Treaty on Indigenous Rights either, which I think was in his first term. So do you detect a pattern here with National and Labour governments?
Public, parliamentary, or even cabinet debate. It would be nice to see some real robust debate in Parliament. Any thoughts on that, gentlemen?
Yeah, sorry to butt in, just me. I don't want to monopolise the conversation, but it's very notable that there's been a massive decline in the standard of parliamentary debates in New Zealand, and I believe it coincided with the accession of Trevor Mallard to the chair of Speaker. The Speaker tradition in the Westminster-style parliaments, whether that's in Australia, Canada, or the UK, is a really important and robust tradition, and we seem to have trashed that. You know, the Speaker's become a partisan figure.
Yep, thank you, Paul. We had Greg asking about a candidate in, where are we? Wanganui? Greg, if you're interested, get in touch with me. We are, actually, that just reminds me, we are still looking for some good people to be our candidates. As you can see, I've got a few good gentlemen here. There are some areas in Canterbury which I'm still looking for, so please get in touch as soon as possible. Really happy to have some meetings with anyone who is interested. And we'll look into that for you, Greg, but if you know of anybody, could you also get in touch? Where are we? Dominique. Okay, so we've got, where are we? Melanie, I think she came in late. We did talk about the other one, Melanie. Yep, no to co-governance. People should get into Parliament on ability to do the job, not race. And New Zealanders should get things on need, as equally not get things based on race. I'm over the government using race to divide us all. I think we all feel the same, Melanie. We are a party that has policies on need, not race-based. So that's great. Now, tonight it was just a little chit-chat for our first one. We will have more, obviously, coming up over the weeks. Sue has mentioned, just made a comment. Thank you. Where are we? Thank you for your courage to stand as candidates. Sue, yeah, that's a good point to make, because it's not an easy space to be in, and when you do stand up, you are basically, you not just sacrifice a lot of things, but you become a little bit of a target in a sense. So it's I thank these guys for being here, and anyone else who is wanting to stand up in that space. Thanks, Sue. Martin, will this live event be followed by a similar event for the North Island? So Martin, at the beginning, you might have missed that I did say that each week we're going to have different people on here and talking about different topics. So next week I have Dewa. Dewa's going to join me. He's from the North Island, and the week after that we will be inviting the North Island candidates, doing the same thing. What is their why they chose New Conservative. And speaking of North Island candidates, there's somebody in the audience who's asked a question, made a comment. Stephen Sen is one of our North Island candidates, and he's got FYI, co-governance equals apartheid. There you go, straight out of the horse's mouth, so to speak, no mucking around. There we go. And Dr. Foster, I support New Conservatives policies 100%. Thank you, Dr. Foster, but I think you need to do more. Yes, we do. Much more to draw attention, and I've said so to one of your board members. Yes, we do need to do a lot more, and this is the beginning of it. If you are not aware, there's lots of other things we do that you may not see, because not all the things are happening on social media. We are out and about in the communities. I'm also on a live show platform every Tuesday, speaking about women's issues and the transgender concerns around the education, etc. We have been on the alternative media now, which is Reality Check Radio, been on there a few times, and we will be on more. We've been on platform, and we have a lot of our stuff published in the BFD. So if you would like to support even more, whoever you are, Dr. Foster, send us a message to see what you can actually put your hands into, because we need lots of good people with all your skills as well. Margaret, how would New Conservative address the issue of truancy in New Zealand schools and the failing education standards? Oh, gosh, that's going to take a while, Margaret. Well, unlike the Education Minister that we have at the moment and the past one, who is now our Prime Minister, we will actually come up with, we do have some good solutions. One is not just sending truancy officers around to homes, because it's a bigger issue than truancy itself. So, for example, Margaret, over the last 4 years, probably a little bit longer, the general population of New Zealanders have lost faith and confidence in our education system, partly because of some of the things that we're teaching, not only around the sexuality education, but also critical race theory, this race-based policies. And Melanie's just said education needs a big review and overhaul, and I completely agree. I also think we need an independent investigation into some of the content that is taught. Teachers seem to think they can just teach any old lesson willy-nilly. They take things like, actually it's the Ministry of Education that are a big issue, because they allow certain content that is not child-friendly. For example, just go and Google Trans 101. That is on our teacher website for any teacher to use in the classroom, to be showing your children what it is a group of young adolescents, about 6 or 7 different ones on various journeys of their identity. We all know that as a young person, as a teenager, we like to individualize ourselves. We like to be a little bit different, and with our personalities. But this is a real harmful thing that we're pushing in schools now around gender confusion. So it's not only about the fact of parents not being able to get their children to school, or a few children bunking. This is a bigger thing. Parents have lost confidence, and they don't actually care that their children aren't going to school, some of them. There's a lot of parents actually choosing to homeschool. Those who are registered, there's roughly half of them that are not going to school. There's a lot of other issues, and we can't just blame it on COVID. Obviously that was a little bit of a factor in getting students back into mainstream school. But I think that as far as secondary goes, there's even bigger issues. Now, Chris, did you want to address any of those issues? I know we've talked about it before. Would you like to make some comments, or not tonight?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we will be pushing for is the complete removal of smartphones or any cell phone from the classroom. I think the social media is basically what's destroying not only the attention span of our kids. What we're seeing in our classrooms is children unable to actually focus on their work, because every minute of the day, whether it is actually in the classroom or in the at an interval in lunchtime, they are on their phones and that constant interruption is just the anathema to learning. And so I think our policy should be to remove them from the classroom. They can bring them to school. It may be expensive to have some sort of locker system where students can actually access their phones during interval and lunchtime, but completely remove the phones from the classroom. And the other big one, I think, is we need to get back to basics. And it used to be known as reading, writing, and arithmetic, and it basically needs to return. Our literacy and numeracy figures are just absolutely appalling. We need to go back to teaching the basics well, and I don't actually believe that IT should be having as big a chop at the actual education at the time we spend. I think we actually need to get kids away from computers much, much more, and actually they can use the computers, but let's get them into writing so they can actually write a sentence. Let's get them into reading so that they can actually focus on something, and let's get their numeracy skills up. So that's where I see it from the teacher's point of view.
Chris, you're a breath of fresh air. I was going to say and add to your comments and ask you if you agreed with me in the fact that actually it's not just about their phones, but it's actually about the devices that we've been given them over the, I don't know, last 6 or 7, maybe a little bit longer years with every device that you can imagine. They do all their work on a laptop or on an iPad. And it's just wasting so much time. They're off task most of the time. You know, I mean, you get a small percentage of children. That's also around the child-centered learning drive around let children lead their own learning. I mean, children need to be guided and you know, in knowledge and things like that. So, Margaret, as you can see, there's a whole pile of things that we need to focus on. The digital device is a huge one, and I completely agree with you, Chris. I think we need to remove that. Half the children can't use a pen. You know, I'm tutoring some children occasionally, and all they want to do is do it on the laptop. You know, you need to be able to still write, no matter what you think. But yeah, look, the Education Minister, Jan Taniti, who unfortunately is also our Women's Minister, is talking about phonics. And I agree, at the junior level, phonics is so necessary, but you cannot only do phonics. It has to be, you know, teachers know how to teach children how to read, and we use all of these great tools that we have. However, when you're talking about the failing standards, Margaret, for Minister Taniti to jump on and only be, you know, to start putting all this money into just the phonics, I mean, we're talking about that's at the beginning. Teachers know how to do that stuff really well. It's at the other end we're talking about. Phonics isn't the issue around, you know, I mean, we most of the children we are teaching how to read and write at that young end. It's at the other end where we're failing them. And I would add to that it's about the overcrowded curriculum. We are constantly pushing more and more on teachers that they have to be teaching children. And it's like, you know, we're almost like the parents now as well, which no parent asked us to be, by the way, you know, teaching about different values. Whose values are we teaching? You know, back off out of families' lives. They need to just focus, like what you said, Chris, on those 3 basics, you know, reading, writing, and arithmetic. So that's a really quick discussion about education. I hope that answered some of your there. Now we've just got, I'll just go through a few more comments before we head out. Some truancy, I'll just try and focus on some people who haven't put up yet. Tony, some truancy may in fact be rejection of the curriculum. Good point. That is being taught. Is any adjustment made for homeschooling? Very good point, Tony. And I can add that is actually a fact. I have some students, high school students, who have emailed me, not only their parents now, but students on their own have emailed me to say that they are fed up, absolutely fed up with being force-fed all this inclusivity, rainbow stuff. In fact, I'm interviewing a young man this weekend, a young 15-year-old, which I will be putting the audio onto Reality Check Radio soon, just before Pride Week. So be listening. I hope you're following that. Be listening into that. Any adjustment made for homeschooling, formal or informal. So I have talked before about the fact that we need to move the the money that's given to each student in the school system, I believe that needs to go to the parent if they choose to homeschool. So thanks for your comment, Tony. Yep, that's right, Dominique. It should be the parents that are talking about some of these things. Melanie, yep, phones should be, gosh. On that note about the phones and the devices, I can remember when I was teaching many years ago in a year 2 class, and one of the parents came up to me and they said, I can't get my, I think he was 6, I can't get my, because he wasn't doing homework. She said, I just can't get my 6-year-old off the iPad, I think it was, or something like that. And I'm like, you know, I mean, guys, come on. If you are giving your 5 and 6-year-old iPads and your phones, you know, think about it. And also the fact that you're the adult. Come on. Yes, Melanie, that's what we said. Schools are putting far too much focus on computer work. And Dominique, there has been an increase in homeschooling with parents involved in teaching their own children because of the lack of the sensible education in our schools. Completely correct. Get back into books. Yes. Could the kids, this is an interesting one, could the kids be trusted to turn their phones off and keep them on their bag? That's interesting, even when I talked before about how we have far too many devices, you know, and then we send the children off to do their learning. I think Chris might be able to agree with me here. How many of those children are actually staying on task or not, you know, choosing to find other websites and things to go to? We're just wasting so much time. Yeah. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. A lot of schools around the country have a policy whereby the kids can bring their phones into the classroom as long as they don't use them. Simple answer to that, Charmaine, is no, it doesn't work. It's not working, and it never will work. It just doesn't. In practicality, there's just too many distractions, and no, it's just a no. It doesn't work. I see it every day.
Yep, absolutely. And I'll just keep firing up these comments because they're really good comments, and it's so good to see that everyone's participating. Dominique, spelling needs to be a focus. Yes, it does. They think that the computer's going to spell check everything, and then they don't know how to spell at all. Melanie, children need to learn to write and spell. Yeah, there we go. Same thing. Not rely on the computers. iPads to spell for them. My daughter finds spelling tricky as she has dyslexia. She needs to practice writing on paper. Yeah, we need the paper and the pen. Really good education stuff here. Back to basics. Totally agree. Writing, maths, reading and spelling. I learned English through phonetics in France. I knew how to pronounce English words because I knew what they meant. Yes, completely correct. But as you would also know, Dominique, there's a lot of words that you cannot sound out. So that's why we need more than only phonics. But we need all those good tools. The money given to schools to teach children should be able to be used to homeschool, which is what we did say. Charmaine, 100% agree. Mark, great to see a guy jump in as well, another guy. When I was at school, even if you behaved, you still got loads of homework. I don't take my work home now. I make a decent living. I hated the classes and teachers who sent homework home. Not sure what your point is, Mark. You probably had a really good education in the classroom, though, because now there's less instruction. Right. If kids get caught with their phones in class, the teachers should be allowed to take phones. Yep. Okay. I'm pretty sure that we've probably done for tonight. We have been here for an hour, and it's great to see so many people still tuned in. Be sure to tune in next Friday. We'll do the same thing at 7:30 with Diwa. I'd like to thank Karl, thank Chris and Paul. Is there anything you gentlemen would like to add before we log out, end the broadcast?
Yeah. Yes, I'd like to jump in there if I can. A big shout out at the moment to our nation's farmers. It's one of the hardest times a year. We've got just transitioning into winter grazing. A lot of effort, work goes into that. It's a lot of time spent out in the cold and the elements. These are the people that feed us. We would be at a lot of strife without them. And I just wanted to have a big shout out to the farmers. All their costs of production are going through the roof. There have been non-stop government regulations thrown at them. And you know the they're what we're all about. You know, like the New Zealand farmer, you know, has been probably the #1 inventor the country's ever had. So big shout out to them. I'm thinking of them, and I know a lot of others that are following us tonight are as well.
Thank you, Karl. I completely 100% agree with you. I remember traveling down to one of your shows, and all I could see is, you know, the land and the farmers, and thinking about them, and the fact that, you know, these kids that were truant today, by the way, doing the climate thing, and they go down to do their weekly grocery shop with their parents to get the meat. I don't know if they actually think about where it comes from. But anyway, thank you, Karl. And we have Stephen obviously on the screen, who has said apparently we're a great looking team. So good stuff, Stephen. We'll give you a medal for that. Melanie, thank you, team. Thank you, Melanie, for joining us. Darwin, thank you as well. Hope to see you out there in some of the meetings. Actually, I'll be out in Hallswell soon. We all will, the four of us, if you'd like to make it to our meeting. We have a meeting on the, 21st of June at Hallswell Centre. So put that in your diaries, people. And Martin, last one. Martin, clap, clap at Karl. Well done. Mention and focus on farmers. And Charmaine just added to it, the farmers have too many unnecessary rules pushed on them, and that's exactly what we think. So it's good night from me and good night from the team. We will see you next week. Keep bringing your comments. Great to see you all. Thank you.